Margaret Chen, 68, a widow for 2 years, and a founding member of the First Presbyterian Church Choir for 45 years, is publicly humiliated by her daughter-in-law during Christmas rehearsals. Jennifer, married to her son David for 8 years, openly criticizes Margaret's voice in front of the entire choir, suggesting she do everyone a favor and just pretend to sing during the Christmas performance. What Jennifer doesn't know is that Margaret taught music for 40 years, trained in vocal performance at Juilliard, and has spent the last decades quietly coaching some of the region's best singers. When the choir director announces a special audition for solos in the most important Christmas program in the church's history, with a visiting professional choir from New York and a live broadcast to thousands, Jennifer signs up immediately, confident in her vocal superiority. Margaret decides to audition as well, revealing her true credentials for the first time in decades. What follows is a devastating twist. Jennifer discovers that the off-key old woman she publicly humiliated is in fact the vocal legend revered by the city's musical community, and that her own vocal technique, which she always considered professional, is amateur in the eyes of real experts. The night of the dress rehearsal becomes the stage for Jennifer's most humiliating exposure, when Margaret not only receives the main solo, but is also revealed as the church's new co-music director, with the authority to decide who stays in the choir. Poetic justice is complete when Jennifer has to beg to keep her spot in the choir she used only as an ego platform. If you've ever been underestimated because of your age, this video is for you. Sometimes the quietest people carry the most powerful talents. If you believe respect has no age and humility beats arrogance, hit like so more people can see this story of justice. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss any stories about people who were underestimated and showed their true worth when no one expected it. Comment below. Have you ever had to prove your value to someone who underestimated you? Share your story in the comments. I love reading every single one. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder never to judge a book by its cover, especially when it comes to our elders. They hold more wisdom and talent than we imagine. Now get ready for a musical justice story you won't forget. "Grandma, don't sing at church," Jennifer whispered loud enough for the entire soprano section to hear. "You're embarrassing yourself. I was holding my hymnal, standing in my usual spot in the back row of the First Presbyterian Church Choir, the same spot I'd occupied every Wednesday night for 45 years. My daughter-in-law's words cut through the room like a knife through silk. Several choir members turned to look. Some pretended they hadn't heard. Others couldn't hide their shock. Jennifer smiled sweetly, as if she'd just offered helpful advice instead of public humiliation. "I'm just being honest, Margaret. Your voice just isn't what it used to be. Maybe it's time to step back and let the younger members shine." I didn't respond, didn't defend myself, just closed my hymnal and returned it to the rack with steady hands. What Jennifer didn't know, what nobody in that room knew except director Patricia Holmes, was that I'd been carrying a secret for 45 years. A secret that was about to change everything. Because tomorrow morning, the audition list for the Christmas Eve solo performance would go up on the bulletin board. And this year, for the first time since my husband died, I'd decided to put my name on it. Jennifer's smile wouldn't last much longer. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not to Wednesday night's rehearsal, but to 2 years ago when my world fell apart, October 12th, 2022, the day I buried Thomas Chen, my husband of 46 years. He died in his sleep peacefully, they said, though I'd argue there's nothing peaceful about waking up next to the love of your life and finding them gone. Thomas had been my anchor, my biggest supporter, the only person who knew about the career I'd walked away from when David was born. The career I'd never once regretted leaving, but sometimes wondered about in quiet moments. Thomas knew I'd studied at Juilliard. He knew I'd been offered positions with the Metropolitan Opera Chorus and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He knew I'd turned them all down to move to Portland, Oregon, to raise our son and teach music at Lincoln High School for 40 years. What Thomas didn't know, because I never told him, was how much I missed performing. Not the career, not the prestige, but the pure act of singing at the highest level I was capable of. After his funeral, our son David and his wife Jennifer moved into our house temporarily. "Just until you get back on your feet, Mom," David had said. That was 2 years ago. They were still there, paying minimal rent and treating my home like their personal property. Jennifer had joined the church choir 6 months after moving in. Not because she loved music or wanted to serve the community, but because the choir director's husband was a partner at Morrison & Associates, the law firm where Jennifer desperately wanted to make connections. Everything Jennifer did was strategic, calculated, designed to advance her social position. She was 34 years old, attractive in that carefully maintained way that required significant time and money. She worked as a real estate agent, moderately successful, constantly networking. Her voice was pleasant enough, trained in the way that comes from high school show choir and maybe a semester of college voice lessons. She could carry a tune, hit the notes, blend reasonably well. In most community choirs, she'd be considered above average, but Jennifer didn't want to be above average. She wanted to be the star, and in her mind, that meant pushing aside anyone she perceived as competition, starting with her elderly mother-in-law, who occupied valuable space in the soprano section. The first incident happened 3 months after she joined. We were rehearsing "O Holy Night" for Christmas. I'd been singing the descant part, the high harmony line that soars above the melody. It's technically challenging, requiring excellent breath control and the ability to sustain notes in the upper register. I'd sung it every Christmas for 4 decades. "Margaret," Jennifer said during the break, "maybe you should try the melody this year instead of the descant. The high notes are really—" She paused delicately. "Challenging at your age." "I'm managing fine," I said simply. "Are you, though?" "Because, from where I'm standing, it sounds a bit strained." She touched my arm with false concern. "I just don't want you to hurt yourself, trying to hit notes that are frankly out of your range now," Patricia Holmes, our choir director, had overheard. "Margaret's descant is beautiful, Jennifer. She's been singing it since before you were born." Jennifer's smile never wavered. "Of course. I'm just thinking about what's best for the overall sound." But the seed was planted. Over the following weeks, Jennifer made subtle comments. Maybe Margaret should stand in the back row where the sound won't carry as much. Perhaps Margaret would be more comfortable with the alto part, less demanding on aging vocal cords. "Has anyone noticed Margaret seems tired during long rehearsals?" Other choir members started looking at me differently, with pity, with concern, as if I were fragile, failing, too proud to admit I should step aside. The truth was more complicated. My voice had changed with age, yes. I'd lost some of the brilliant top notes I'd had at 25. The effortless coloratura passages I'd once executed required more careful technique now. But I'd also gained depth, richness, emotional resonance that only comes with decades of living. I knew how to manage my instrument, how to work within its current capabilities while maintaining excellent tone and intonation, but explaining that would require revealing who I'd been before I became Mom and Mrs. Chen, and I'd made a choice 46 years ago to leave that person behind. David never questioned his wife's behavior. He'd grown up hearing me sing around the house, teaching students, directing school musicals. To him, I was just Mom who liked music. He had no idea about Juilliard, about the auditions I'd won, about the future I'd chosen to walk away from. Thomas and I had agreed early on that David would grow up normal, without the pressure of having a mother who'd once been considered a rising star in classical vocal performance. So when Jennifer complained about my singing, David just nodded sympathetically. "Maybe Mom is overdoing it," he'd say. "She's not as young as she used to be." By November 2024, Jennifer had escalated her campaign. She'd convinced several newer choir members that I was holding back the group's sound. She'd suggested to Patricia that perhaps it was time to rotate older members into emeritus status, where they'd be honored but not actively performing. She'd even researched other churches with senior citizen choirs, leaving brochures strategically around my house. The Wednesday night that changed everything was December 4th, 2024. We were 3 weeks from Christmas Eve, preparing for the most important performance in our church's recent history. The renowned New York chamber singers were visiting Portland as part of their national tour, and they'd agreed to perform a joint concert with our church choir, broadcast live to over 10,000 viewers online. Patricia had announced that auditions would be held for featured solos. This wasn't unusual. We'd always had auditions for major performances. What was unusual was the caliber of the opportunity. Singing alongside the New York chamber singers, broadcast to thousands, reviewed by professional music critics. It was the kind of exposure that launched careers. Jennifer saw it as her moment to shine. I saw it as my moment to finally reveal the truth. That Wednesday, Jennifer arrived at rehearsal carrying expensive sheet music she'd purchased specifically for her audition. She'd chosen O mio babbino caro from Puccini's Gianni Schicchi, a beautiful piece, very popular, technically accessible, but emotionally demanding. It required excellent Italian pronunciation, smooth legato lines, and the ability to convey desperate pleading without overselling the drama. She made sure everyone knew about her preparation. "I've been working with a voice coach in Seattle," she announced during the pre-rehearsal social time. "He says I have real potential for operatic performance." He was actually surprised I hadn't pursued it professionally. Several choir members congratulated her. A few asked if she'd sing a preview. Jennifer demurred with false modesty. "I don't want to spoil the audition surprise, but let's just say I've been preparing something special." Then she turned to me with that smile, the one that looked kind but carried a knife. "Margaret, are you planning to audition? Because if you need help choosing something appropriate for your range, I'd be happy to suggest some pieces that are less demanding. Maybe something from the church hymnal." That's when I made my decision. I'd been wavering, wondering if it was too late, if I should just let the past stay buried. But Jennifer's condescension, her assumption that I was some amateur who'd been singing church hymns without training or skill, crystallized something inside me. "I'm planning to audition," I said quietly. "Really?" Jennifer's eyebrows rose. "That's wonderful. It'll be a good experience, even if you don't get selected. The important thing is participating." During rehearsal that night, Jennifer made her move. We were working on Angels We Have Heard on High, a piece with long melismatic passages on the word Gloria. It requires stamina and excellent breath management. I was demonstrating the correct phrasing for my section when Jennifer interrupted. "Patricia, I'm sorry, but I have to say something." She turned to face the entire choir. "I think we all need to be honest about something. Margaret, you're a lovely person, and we all appreciate your dedication, but your voice is affecting our section's sound. The vibrato is too wide, the pitch is inconsistent, and honestly, it's becoming a distraction." The room went completely silent. 45 people staring at me, waiting to see how I'd respond. Jennifer continued, emboldened by the attention. "I'm not trying to be mean. I'm being honest, which is what friends do. Grandma, don't sing at church anymore. Or at least don't sing full voice. Lip sync during the performance. Fake it. Do everyone a favor and let the people who can actually sing carry the sound. Grandma." She called me Grandma in front of the entire choir, reducing me to a role rather than a person. I wasn't Margaret Chen, soprano section member, for 45 years. I was Grandma, old and past my prime. Patricia started to intervene. "Jennifer, that's completely inappropriate," but I held up my hand. "It's fine, Patricia. I understand Jennifer's concern." I closed my hymnal, returned it to the rack, and picked up my purse. "I'll see everyone at the auditions tomorrow." I drove home in silence, hands steady on the wheel, mind already planning. When I walked into my house, the house Thomas and I had bought in 1979 for $89,000 and was now worth over $800,000. I went straight to my bedroom closet. In the back, behind the winter coats and formal dresses I rarely wore anymore, was a banker's box I hadn't opened in decades. Inside were the remnants of my first life. Programs from performances at Juilliard, letters of recommendation from professors, audition notices from the Metropolitan Opera, reviews from critics who'd called me a promising young soprano with exceptional coloratura technique and unusual emotional depth. And at the bottom, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, my audition dress from 1978. Black, simple, elegant. I held it up, wondering if it would still fit after 46 years. There was something else in that box. A letter from Maestro Giovanni Bartoli, the conductor who'd wanted me for the Met chorus. His words came back to me across the decades. Miss Chen, you possess a rare combination of technical mastery and interpretive sensitivity. I urge you to reconsider your decision. The world of opera needs voices like yours. Teaching is noble work, but you were meant to sing. I'd chosen teaching. Chosen David, chosen stability. Chosen a life where I could use my gifts to help others discover theirs. I'd never regretted it. But now, holding that letter, I realized I'd also chosen invisibility. And invisibility had allowed people like Jennifer to assume I was nothing more than an old woman who'd sung in church choirs because she had nothing better to do. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Jennifer would learn exactly who she'd been insulting for the past year and a half. I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls. First to Patricia Holmes. Patricia, I need you to do something for me. Don't tell anyone, but I need the New York Chamber Singers director, whoever they're sending to judge the auditions, to be present for mine. Margaret, what's going on? Just trust me, please. Second call was to my former colleague, Dr. Sarah Morrison, who'd been chair of the music department at Lincoln High School when I retired 12 years ago. Sarah, I need you to send me copies of my credentials. All of them. The Juilliard transcripts, the performance reviews, everything. Margaret, are you finally going to tell David about your past? Maybe. But first, I'm going to remind myself. Third call was to Robert Chen, my late husband's brother and a partner at one of Portland's most prestigious law firms. Robert, I need to discuss something about my house and David's residency arrangement. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow morning before the auditions? The next morning, December 5th, I met Robert at a cafe 3 blocks from the church. I explained the situation, the humiliation, the condescension, Jennifer's campaign to push me out of the choir. And more importantly, the financial reality I'd been avoiding for 2 years. David and Jennifer were supposed to pay me $1,500 monthly for rent, utilities, and food. They'd been late or short on payments 11 times in 24 months. They owed me $18,400 in back rent. Meanwhile, they'd purchased a new BMW SUV, taken 3 vacations, and Jennifer had undergone $20,000 worth of cosmetic procedures. Robert listened carefully, taking notes. Margaret, you know you could evict them with 30 days' notice. I know. But that's not what I want. Not yet, anyway. What I want is documentation. A formal accounting of what they owe, a legal rental agreement with clear terms, and most importantly, protection for my estate. He nodded slowly. You're worried about what happens to the house after you're gone. I pulled out papers I'd found in Jennifer's things the week before while doing laundry. Real estate listings for waterfront properties in Lake Oswego, ranging from $1.2 to $1.8 million. Handwritten calculations on the margin showing that selling my house for $800,000 would give them enough for a down payment. They're planning to sell, I said quietly. They're just waiting for me to die. Robert's expression hardened. Let me prepare some documents. Revised will, rental agreement, accounting of debts. I'll have everything ready by Monday, thank you. And Robert, one more thing. After today, after the auditions, I may need you to be present for a family conversation with David. He squeezed my hand. Thomas would be proud of you. He always said you were stronger than anyone gave you credit for. The auditions were scheduled for 2 o'clock at the church. I arrived at 1:30, carrying my music in a leather portfolio I hadn't touched in decades. I'd chosen my audition piece carefully. Not something popular or overdone. Not something that would let Jennifer claim I'd picked an easy song to hide my limitations. I'd chosen Casta Diva from Bellini's Norma, one of the most demanding arias in the soprano repertoire. It requires extraordinary breath control to sustain the long, floating phrases, perfect legato technique to create seamless vocal lines. The ability to sing in the highest register with clarity and power while maintaining a sense of ethereal calm. Most professional sopranos spend years preparing before attempting it in public. Many never perform it at all because it's simply too risky, too exposed, too unforgiving of any technical flaws. If I failed, I'd prove Jennifer right. But if I succeeded, I'd prove something much more important. That age doesn't erase talent, training, or dedication. It just transforms them. Patricia saw me arrive and pulled me aside immediately. Margaret, I need to prepare you. The judge for today's auditions is Maestro Daniel Rothstein. He's the music director for the New York Chamber Singers. I know who he is. I'd known Daniel Rothstein when he was a graduate student at Juilliard, studying conducting while I was completing my vocal performance degree. We'd worked together on several productions. He'd been brilliant even then, destined for greatness. Patricia looked nervous. He's very demanding. His standards are exceptionally high. Some of our choir members might find his critiques difficult to hear. I understand. And Margaret, I told him about you. About your background. I started to protest, but she held up her hand. He remembered you. He said to tell you he's been waiting 46 years to hear you sing again. Jennifer arrived at 1:45, dressed in a designer outfit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. She'd had her hair professionally styled, her makeup applied by someone who knew what they were doing. She looked confident, polished, ready to impress. She saw me, and her smile faltered slightly. "Margaret, you're actually going through with this?" I said I would. "Right, but I thought maybe you'd reconsidered after last night. After our honest conversation about your limitations." She lowered her voice. "I'm really not trying to be mean, but performing in front of a professional judge from New York, it's a different level than what you're used to. I suppose we'll see." Other choir members were gathering. 12 people total had signed up for auditions. The format was simple. Each singer would perform their chosen piece, receive feedback from Maestro Rothstein, and then be dismissed while he deliberated. The results would be posted on the choir bulletin board by 5 o'clock. At exactly 2 o'clock, Patricia opened the sanctuary doors and called the first auditioner. Sarah Williams, one of our altos, had chosen Ave Maria. She sang beautifully, her rich lower register filling the sanctuary with warmth. When she finished, Maestro Rothstein gave constructive feedback about breath support and diction, but overall praised her musicianship. One by one, choir members performed. Most chose accessible, well-known pieces. A few attempted more challenging works with mixed results. Maestro Rothstein was kind but honest, offering specific technical critiques alongside genuine encouragement. Jennifer was called seventh. She walked to the front of the sanctuary with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her own superiority. She handed her music to the accompanist, positioned herself carefully, and began, "O mio babbino caro." Her voice was pleasant. The Italian pronunciation was adequate, if not authentic. She hit the notes accurately and maintained decent breath support throughout. For a community choir audition, it was a solid, respectable performance, but it wasn't special. It lacked the vulnerability the piece demands, the desperate pleading of a daughter begging her father for permission to marry. Jennifer sang it like someone performing a song, not like someone living a moment. The technical elements were there, but the soul was missing. When she finished, Maestro Rothstein nodded politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You have a pleasant voice and adequate technique. However, I'd encourage you to work on emotional connection to the text. Opera isn't just about hitting notes correctly. It's about storytelling, about making the audience believe you're living the character's experience." Jennifer's smile tightened. Of course, I was a bit nervous. I'm sure in performance, I'd bring more emotion. Perhaps. He made notes on his clipboard. The technical aspects are serviceable, though I'd recommend more work on your breath management for longer phrases and attention to your vowel shapes for better resonance. Thank you. She returned to her seat, clearly disappointed by the lukewarm response. Several choir members whispered encouragement, telling her she'd done wonderfully. Jennifer nodded, but kept glancing at the doors, wondering who else might have impressed the maestro more than she had. 4 more singers performed, a tenor attempting Nessun Dorma with more enthusiasm than technique. 2 sopranos singing Pai Jesu and Panis Angelicus with genuine sweetness. A baritone whose Some Enchanted Evening showed real promise. Then Patricia called my name. Margaret Chen, you're next. The room went completely still. Jennifer actually laughed, a small sound of disbelief quickly covered by a cough. I walked to the front of the sanctuary, my music in hand. I'd worn a simple black dress, nothing flashy, nothing designed to call attention to anything except my voice. I handed my music to the accompanist, a talented woman named Rebecca, who'd played for the church for 20 years. Her eyes widened when she saw the piece. "Margaret, are you sure?" "I'm sure." I positioned myself not center stage like Jennifer had done, but slightly to the side where I could see both the accompanist and the audience. I took a breath, feeling the familiar sensation of air filling my lungs completely, my ribcage expanding, my body preparing to create sound. Maestro Rothstein was watching me carefully, his expression unreadable. The piano introduction began. 4 measures of simple accompaniment establishing the key and mood. Then my entrance, the first phrase of Casta Diva floating above the piano like a prayer to the moon goddess. My voice had changed in 46 years. It was darker now, richer, with less brilliance in the highest notes. But I'd learned to work with that change, to use the added depth and warmth to create a different kind of beauty. The long, sustained phrases that terrified younger singers came naturally to me now because I understood breath management, not just intellectually, but instinctively, the way you understand walking or breathing. The aria built slowly, ascending higher and higher until I reached the exposed high notes that make Casta Diva so dangerous to perform. Notes that require perfect placement, absolute control, and the courage to let them ring out without pushing or forcing. I let them soar, clear, sustained, floating on the breath like candle flames that never waver. The sanctuary's acoustics carried them perfectly, and for 3 minutes I wasn't Margaret Chen, 68-year-old widow and retired music teacher. I was a voice, pure and focused, serving the music the way I'd been trained to do more than 4 decades ago. When I finished, the silence lasted 5 full seconds. Then Maestro Rothstein began clapping. Not the polite applause that had followed other auditioners, but genuine, enthusiastic applause. He stood up, still clapping, smiling widely. "Magnificent," he said. "Margaret, you haven't lost a single element of what made you special at Juilliard. The technique is still flawless. The musicianship is even deeper now. And that high B-flat, my God, it was absolutely perfect." The choir members sat frozen, trying to process what they'd just heard and what the maestro was saying. Jennifer's face had gone white. Patricia stepped forward. For those who don't know, I think it's time Margaret's background was revealed. She walked to the front of the sanctuary and pulled out a folder I'd given her that morning. Margaret Chen graduated from Juilliard School of Music in 1978 with a degree in vocal performance. She was offered positions with the Metropolitan Opera Chorus and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. She was personally recruited by Maestro Giovanni Bartoli and praised by multiple New York Times critics as one of the most promising young sopranos of her generation. She paused, letting that information settle. Instead of pursuing that career, Margaret chose to move to Portland with her husband Thomas and teach music at Lincoln High School for 40 years. She trained hundreds of students, many of whom went on to professional careers in music. She founded this church's choir program 45 years ago and has been one of its most dedicated members ever since. And she has never, not once in all those years, mentioned her credentials or demanded recognition for her expertise. Maestro Rothstein added his own testimony. "I was a graduate conducting student when Margaret was finishing her vocal degree. We worked together on several productions. I watched her sing roles that most students wouldn't attempt. I heard her receive praise from teachers who rarely gave compliments. And I've always wondered what happened to her, why she disappeared from the classical music world when she had so much promise. He looked directly at me. Now I know. You chose something more important than fame. You chose family and teaching. That's admirable, Margaret. But I hope you know that your gift didn't disappear just because you weren't performing on major stages. That voice, that training, that musicianship, it's still remarkable. Jennifer finally found her voice. But why didn't anyone know? Why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't need to, I said simply. I didn't join this choir to impress anyone or prove anything. I joined because I love singing and I loved this community. My past credentials don't make me a better choir member than anyone else here. Patricia smiled. Actually, Margaret, about that. She pulled out another document. The church board met last week and asked me to offer you a position. We'd like you to serve as co-director of music programs, not replacing me, but working alongside me, helping with vocal training and solo selection, and bringing your expertise to help our entire program grow. I stared at her. Patricia, I retired 12 years ago. I'm not looking to take on new responsibilities. Think about it, she said. We don't need an answer today. Maestro Rothstein closed his folder. I don't need to hear anyone else. Margaret, the Christmas Eve solo is yours if you want it. You'll sing Casta Diva with the New York Chamber Singers, broadcast to our entire audience. And frankly, I can't think of anyone more deserving. The other auditioners looked disappointed but not surprised. What they'd just witnessed was clearly on a different level than anything else they'd heard that afternoon. Even the kindest person couldn't argue that I hadn't earned the solo. Jennifer, however, wasn't kind. This is ridiculous, she said, standing up. You're giving the solo to her because of some degrees from 50 years ago? What about people who are actually in their prime? What about singers who aren't struggling with age-related vocal decline? Mrs. Chen, Maestro Rothstein said coolly, your mother-in-law just performed one of the most technically demanding arias in the soprano repertoire, flawlessly, with better technique than most professional sopranos half her age. There is no age-related vocal decline. There is only experience, training, and dedication, all of which Margaret possesses in abundance. But she's old. Jennifer's voice rose. She should be encouraging younger singers, not hogging the spotlight. The spotlight? I finally spoke up, my voice calm but clear. Jennifer, I've been singing in this choir for 45 years. I've never asked for a solo, never demanded recognition, never tried to push anyone else aside. You joined 18 months ago and immediately started campaigning to get rid of anyone you perceived as competition. You've insulted my singing, my age, my place in this choir. You told me last night to lip-sync during performances so I wouldn't ruin the sound. I walked toward her slowly, steadily. You called me grandma in front of the entire choir and told me to stop singing at church. You did that because you assumed I was just some old woman who didn't know any better. You assumed my presence here was about nostalgia rather than genuine ability. You were wrong. Jennifer's face was red now, tears starting to form. I was just trying to help. I didn't know you never said anything about Juilliard or the Met or any of it. Because it wasn't relevant, I said, until you made it relevant by attacking my competence. You didn't have to know my credentials to treat me with basic respect. Every person in this choir, regardless of their training or background, deserves to be valued for their contribution and treated with dignity. You failed to do that, not because you didn't know about my past, but because you didn't think my present mattered. Maestro Rothstein stood up. I think we're done here for today. Results will be posted at 5 o'clock as planned. Thank you all for auditioning. He nodded to Patricia and walked toward the exit, pausing to shake my hand. Margaret, it was an honor hearing you sing again. I hope you'll consider continuing to perform, even if just occasionally. The world needs reminders that excellence doesn't have an expiration date. After he left, the sanctuary slowly cleared. Choir members approached me tentatively, some apologizing for not defending me against Jennifer's comments, others asking if I'd be willing to give them voice lessons. I accepted the apologies and declined the lesson requests politely, explaining that I was truly retired from teaching. Jennifer sat alone in her pew, crying quietly. David arrived shortly after, having received panicked texts from his wife. He found me in the hallway outside the sanctuary. "Mom, Jennifer is really upset. She says you humiliated her at the auditions, did I? Or did she humiliate herself by attacking someone without knowing anything about their background?" He shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't know about Juilliard. You'd never told us. I never told you because it wasn't important. I was your mother. I taught music. I sang in the church choir. That was enough. But David, your wife has been tearing me down for 18 months. She's convinced half this choir that I'm too old and incompetent to contribute meaningfully. She told me last night to stop singing and just fake it during performances. That's not a misunderstanding or an accident. That's deliberate cruelty. She was trying to help. Help who? Herself? Because from where I'm standing, she was trying to eliminate anyone she saw as competition so she could be the star of the church choir. And when that didn't work, when the actual qualified judge chose me over her, she threw a tantrum." David looked through the sanctuary doors at his crying wife. "Mom, can you just, I don't know, can you talk to her? Smooth this over?" "No," I said. "I can't smooth this over. Jennifer needs to understand that actions have consequences. She chose to be cruel. She chose to insult me publicly. She chose to campaign against me to other choir members. Now she has to live with the results of those choices. You're really not going to help her save face." "I already helped her, David. I didn't reveal her behavior to Maestro Rothstein. I didn't tell him she'd spent 18 months trying to get me removed from the choir. I didn't mention that she called me grandma and told me I was embarrassing myself. I simply sang, and my singing spoke for itself. If Jennifer feels humiliated, it's not because of anything I did. It's because she finally had to face the reality that she's not as talented as she believed, and I'm not as incompetent as she claimed." I started walking toward the exit, then turned back. "And David, we need to have a family conversation this weekend. About the house, about your rental arrangement, about your financial obligations to me. Robert will be joining us. This isn't about the choir or the auditions. This is about the fact that you and Jennifer have been taking advantage of my generosity for 2 years, and that needs to end." At 5 o'clock, Patricia posted the results on the choir bulletin board. I wasn't there to see it, but multiple people called to tell me what happened. The Christmas Eve solo performance would be split into 3 parts. I would sing Casta Diva as the featured opening piece, performing alongside the New York Chamber Singers. 2 other choir members would sing shorter pieces during the program. Jennifer's name appeared nowhere on the solo list, but there was an additional announcement that Patricia hadn't mentioned during the auditions. The church board had approved the creation of a new position, Associate Director of Music. They'd offered it to me, and Patricia had posted my acceptance before I'd actually given one, confident that I wouldn't refuse. The position came with responsibilities: vocal coaching for choir members, solo selection for major performances, and partnership with Patricia in developing the church's overall music program. It also came with authority. The associate director had full discretion to determine choir membership based on vocal ability, attendance, and conduct. In other words, I now had the power to remove Jennifer from the choir entirely if her behavior didn't improve. Patricia had given me the weapon I needed to ensure Jennifer never humiliated anyone again. But I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in justice, and justice meant creating a choir where everyone was valued, where age and experience were respected, where people contributed based on their abilities rather than their egos. That evening, Jennifer called me 17 times. I didn't answer. David called 8 times, texted 14. I responded to one text. Family meeting Sunday at 2 p.m. Robert will be present. This is non-negotiable. Saturday passed quietly. I spent the day practicing Casta Diva, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. The joy of singing purely for art, rather than obligation or proof, had been missing from my life for too long. Sunday arrived. Robert showed up at 1:45 with his briefcase full of documents. David and Jennifer came downstairs at exactly 2 o'clock, Jennifer's eyes red from crying, David looking defensive. We sat around my dining room table, the same table where Thomas and I had shared 46 years of meals, where we'd helped David with homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday dinners. It felt appropriate to have this conversation here, where memory and reality intersected. Robert laid out the papers methodically, first an accounting of rent payments over the past 24 months. They'd paid in full only 13 times. 11 payments were later short. Total amount owed, $18,400. David stared at the numbers. We've been going through some financial difficulties. We were going to catch up. With what money? Robert asked. According to your spending records, which your mother has documented from shared household expenses, you've spent over $60,000 on non-essential purchases in the same time period. New car, vacations, cosmetic procedures, designer clothes, expensive meals out. We needed those things, Jennifer said quickly. You needed a $20,000 cosmetic procedure while owing your mother-in-law $18,000 in back rent. Robert's tone was neutral, but his meaning was clear. I pulled out the second set of documents, the real estate listings Jennifer had been researching. Waterfront properties in Lake Oswego, all priced above $1 million. Calculations showing that selling my house would provide enough for a down payment. David's face went pale. Mom, we were just looking at houses you can't possibly afford unless you sell mine, I said. Tell me, David, were you planning to wait until I died? Or were you going to convince me to move into a retirement home and give you power of attorney over the estate? The silence answered my question. Margaret, Robert said gently, let's focus on solutions rather than accusations. He pulled out the revised rental agreement. Moving forward, rent will be $2,000 monthly, paid on the first of each month. Late payments will incur a $50 fee per day. The $18,000 in back rent will be paid through a payment plan of $500 monthly, in addition to current rent, or through a lump sum within 30 days. We can't afford that. Jennifer protested. Then you'll need to make different living arrangements, Robert said simply. These are the terms. You can accept them, or you can find somewhere else to live. David looked at me. Mom, please. We're family. Family doesn't lie about real estate plans, I said. Family doesn't accumulate debt while spending money on luxuries. And family certainly doesn't systematically humiliate their mother in front of her church community. That was about the choir, Jennifer interrupted. That had nothing to do with the house or money, didn't it? I asked quietly. You've spent 18 months trying to push me aside, make me feel incompetent, convince everyone I was too old to contribute meaningfully. And all along, you've been researching how much my house is worth and planning your next move. You wanted me diminished, Jennifer, small, easy to dismiss when the time came to make decisions about my care or my property. That's not true. Then explain the brochures for senior living facilities you left on my kitchen counter last month. The ones highlighting memory care and assisted living programs. David's head snapped toward his wife. Jennifer, you didn't. She was defensive now. I was just gathering information, in case Margaret needed help in the future. I'm 68 years old, I said. I drive, I cook, I manage my finances, I sing opera arias that most professionals won't attempt. Exactly what part of my life suggests I need assisted living? Robert intervened. Let's be clear about what's happening here. Mrs. Jennifer Chen has been conducting a coordinated campaign to undermine Margaret's credibility and independence. The choir incidents are just the visible part. She's been researching senior facilities, planning for property liquidation, and creating a narrative of decline that simply doesn't exist. He pulled out more papers. These are statements from 3 church choir members who were willing to go on record about Jennifer's comments regarding Margaret's competence. Multiple instances of suggesting Margaret was experiencing cognitive decline, memory issues, or inability to care for herself. All false, all designed to create a paper trail that could later be used to justify guardianship or conservatorship proceedings. David looked shocked. "Jennifer, is this true?" She was crying again. "I was protecting our future. Your mother has this huge house and she's all alone. It's not safe. And she's clearly not thinking straight if she's singing in church at her age, embarrassing herself. I sang at a professional level that exceeded 99% of community choir members," I said, "including you. The only person who was embarrassed was you, when you realized you'd been insulting someone far more qualified than yourself." Robert continued. "Margaret has revised her estate plan." He slid papers across the table. "Upon her death, this house will be donated to the Oregon Music Education Foundation. They'll sell it and use the proceeds to fund scholarships for music students from underserved communities. David, you're still named as executor and will receive personal effects and a cash bequest of $50,000. But the house is no longer part of your inheritance." David stared at the documents. "Mom, you're cutting me out." "I'm ensuring my legacy goes where it matters," I said. "Thomas and I bought this house because it was in a good school district and we wanted you to have opportunities. We sacrificed so you could have advantages we didn't have. But you've turned that sacrifice into entitlement. You think you deserve this house because you're my son, regardless of how you treat me or how you manage your finances. What about grandchildren?" Jennifer said desperately, "What if we have children? Don't you want to leave them something?" "If you have children," I said, "I hope you teach them the value of gratitude, respect, and financial responsibility. Lessons you apparently never learned. My estate will fund scholarships for students who appreciate education and opportunity, not children who expect to inherit wealth they didn't earn." Jennifer stood up abruptly. "This is insane. You're punishing us because I criticized your singing. That's petty and vindictive." "I'm protecting myself," I corrected, "from a daughter-in-law who's been systematically working to undermine my independence and a son who's allowed it to happen." David finally spoke up. "Mom, I didn't know about most of this. The real estate research, the senior facility brochures, the comments to choir members. Jennifer handled those things without telling me. Did she also spend your money without telling you?" Robert asked. "The cosmetic procedures, the designer wardrobe, the expensive vacations while you owed your mother $18,000. David had no answer. "You have a choice," I said. "Accept the new rental terms, pay back what you owe, and treat me with the respect I deserve. Or find somewhere else to live within 30 days. Those are the only options. Mom, please, I've made my decision, David. The question is whether you'll make yours." Jennifer grabbed her purse. "I'm not staying here to be insulted. This is emotional abuse." She stormed toward the stairs. "Mrs. Chen," Robert called after her, "if you leave this property without your husband, that's your choice. But you should know that any attempt to contest Margaret's estate plan, claim undue influence, or pursue guardianship proceedings will be met with legal action, including civil suits for elder abuse and fraud." She froze on the stairs. "We have documentation," Robert continued. "Video recordings of you making false statements about Margaret's competence. Written evidence of your research into her property value. Testimony from multiple witnesses about your campaign to undermine her credibility. If you choose to escalate the situation, it will not end well for you." Jennifer looked at David, waiting for him to defend her. He was staring at the table, processing everything he'd just learned. "David," I said gently, "you're my son and I love you. But love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Jennifer needs to understand that actions have consequences. And you need to understand that family loyalty works both ways. I've supported you for 2 years, while you took advantage of my generosity. That ends now. What do you want from us?" he asked quietly. "I want honesty. I want respect. I want you to treat me like a competent adult rather than an obstacle to your real estate ambitions." And I want you to take responsibility for your finances instead of planning to coast on my death." The room was silent except for Jennifer's quiet sobbing on the stairs. Robert packed up his papers. "You have until Wednesday to decide. Accept the new terms in writing or start looking for a new place to live." Margaret has been more than patient. After they left, I sat alone in my dining room. The house felt different now. Less like a sanctuary and more like a battlefield where I'd finally drawn necessary lines. My phone rang. "Patricia Holmes. Margaret, I just heard from Maestro Rothstein. He wants to know if you'd consider giving a master class for the New York chamber singers when they're in Portland. He thinks their younger members would benefit from hearing about your career choices and your approach to vocal technique." I smiled. "Tell him I'd be honored, and Margaret, I hope you'll accept the associate director position. This choir needs you, not just your voice, but your wisdom and experience." "I'll accept on one condition," I said. "Jennifer stays in the choir." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. She needs to learn that talent isn't about pushing others down. It's about lifting everyone up. If she can't learn that, if she continues to be divisive or disrespectful, then we'll address it. But everyone deserves a chance to grow. You're more generous than I would be. It's not generosity, Patricia. It's understanding. I spent 46 years teaching students who thought they knew everything. Some of them learned, some didn't, but they all deserved the chance to try." That Wednesday, David came to me alone. Jennifer was staying with her mother in Seattle, taking some time to process. "Mom," he said, "we'll sign the rental agreement. We'll pay back what we owe. And I'm sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have defended you. You should have," I agreed. "But I understand why you didn't. Jennifer can be very convincing, and you wanted to believe her because she's your wife. Are you really going to give away the house?" "Yes, not to punish you, David, but to honor your father and the life we built together. Thomas and I always believed in education, in giving opportunities to people who needed them. This is the right use for our legacy." He nodded slowly. "I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. And David, if you and Jennifer have children someday, I'll be a loving grandmother. But I won't be a convenient inheritance or a source of guilt-free funding. You'll need to build your own life, your own security, just like Thomas and I did." We sat together in silence for a while, father and son trying to find their way back to each other across the distance that had grown between them. The rehearsals leading up to Christmas Eve were different. Jennifer returned after missing 2 Wednesdays, quiet and subdued. She stood in the soprano section without comment, sang her parts without trying to dominate, and left immediately after practice without socializing. Other choir members treated me differently too. With respect, yes, but also with distance. I'd become someone they didn't quite know how to relate to. Not just Margaret, who'd always been there, but Margaret from Juilliard, Margaret who turned down the Met, Margaret the associate director. Only Patricia treated me the same, which I appreciated more than I could express. 3 weeks before Christmas, Jennifer approached me after rehearsal. "Margaret, can we talk?" We sat in an empty Sunday school classroom, Jennifer perched on the edge of a child-sized chair, me standing by the window. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was jealous and insecure, and I took it out on you in the cruelest way possible." "Why were you jealous?" I asked genuinely. "You're young, attractive, successful in your career. What did you have to be jealous about?" "Because you have what I want," she said quietly. "Respect, legacy, people who genuinely care about you, not because of what you can do for them, but because of who you are. I've spent my entire adult life performing, trying to be impressive, trying to matter. And you just existed, quietly and competently, and everyone loved you. I hated that, so you tried to tear me down." She nodded, tears streaming. "I convinced myself you were the problem, that you were holding people back, that the choir would be better without you. But really I was terrified that I'd never be as good as you, never as valued, never as secure in my place." "Jennifer," I said, sitting down across from her, "you're 34 years old. You have time to build the life you want, but you can't build it by destroying other people. You have to build it by becoming someone worth respecting. I don't know how to do that. Start by being honest about your abilities, your limitations, your motivations. You're a decent singer with adequate training. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Most people can't carry a tune. You can do more than that, but you're not a professional and you're not going to be. Accept that and find satisfaction in what you can do rather than resenting what you can't. She wiped her eyes. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you give up the Met? The career, all of it. You were so talented. Why walk away? I smiled. Because I wanted something more important than talent. I wanted a family. I wanted to teach. I wanted a life where I could see the impact I was making every single day. Opera is beautiful, but it's also brutal. Constant competition, constant judgment, constant performance. I didn't want that. I wanted Thomas and David and students and a community where I belonged. Do you ever regret it? Sometimes I wonder what might have been, I admitted. But I don't regret it. Every choice we make closes some doors and opens others. I chose the doors that led to a rich, meaningful life. Maybe not famous, but full. That was enough for me. I don't know if that would be enough for me. Then you need to figure out what would be, I said. Because right now, you're chasing shadows. Recognition, status, being perceived as special. Those things are hollow, Jennifer. They don't sustain you when life gets hard. Find something real to build your life around. She stood up slowly. Thank you for not kicking me out of the choir, for giving me another chance. Everyone deserves another chance, I said. What you do with it is up to you. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of Portland winter night where the air feels sharp and clean. First Presbyterian Church was packed, over 500 people in the pews, and another 1,000 watching online. The New York Chamber Singers filled the chancel, professional musicians in formal concert dress. I wore my black audition dress from 1978. It still fit, remarkably. Maybe I'd shrunk a little, or maybe some things are meant to last. Patricia introduced me to the congregation, briefly explaining my background without sensationalizing it. We're honored tonight to feature one of our founding choir members, Margaret Chen, who will be performing Bellini's Casta Diva alongside the New York Chamber Singers. The sanctuary lights dimmed. The piano introduction began, joined by the chamber orchestra the New York group had brought with them. Strings and woodwinds weaving together to create the ethereal atmosphere the aria required. I took my breath and sang. The first phrase floated out over the congregation, that long, sustained line that always makes audiences hold their breath with you. I could feel the room listening, truly listening, not just hearing but experiencing the music as I sang. I thought about Thomas, about the life we'd built together, about the choice I'd made 46 years ago that led me to this moment. I thought about David in the third pew, watching his mother do something he'd never imagined she could do. I thought about Jennifer in the soprano section, maybe beginning to understand that real talent doesn't need to destroy others to shine. But mostly, I just sang. For the joy of it, for the art of it, for the pure act of creating beauty with breath and sound and years of training that never left me even when I wasn't using it. The aria built to its climax, the exposed high notes that terrified most sopranos. I let them soar, clear and sustained and absolutely secure, not showing off, just serving the music the way it deserved to be served. When I finished, the silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then the applause began, starting with Maestro Rothstein and spreading through the entire sanctuary. The New York Chamber Singers were standing, applauding. The congregation was standing. Even Jennifer was standing, clapping with tears streaming down her face. I bowed simply and returned to my place in the choir. The rest of the concert continued beautifully, other soloists performing their pieces. The combined choirs singing together with precision and joy. But the moment I'd remember, the moment that made everything worthwhile, came during the final carol. We were singing Silent Night in 4-part harmony, the entire church joining in. I looked out over the congregation and saw faces filled with peace and wonder. I looked at the choir around me, people of all ages and abilities, creating something beautiful together. And I looked at Jennifer, singing quietly in the row ahead of me. She glanced back once, caught my eye and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." After the service, dozens of people approached me. Former students who'd attended the concert, choir members thanking me for years of quiet leadership. Strangers who'd been moved by the performance. Maestro Rothstein found me in the crowd. "Margaret, that was extraordinary. I meant what I said about the masterclass. And I have another proposal. Would you consider recording an album of art songs and arias? Nothing commercial, just a document of your artistry for posterity." I smiled. "Let me think about it." David hugged me tightly. "Mom, I had no idea. I mean, I knew you could sing, but that was incredible. I was your mother first," I said. Everything else was secondary. Jennifer approached hesitantly. "Margaret, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I'm sorry for every horrible thing I said about your voice. I was so wrong. We all make mistakes," I told her. "What matters is what we learn from them." On the drive home that night, I thought about the journey that had led to this moment. From Juilliard to a small Portland church, from promising young soprano to retired music teacher to church choir member to, finally, someone willing to reveal who she'd always been underneath the roles she'd played. The house was quiet when I arrived. David and Jennifer had returned to their own apartment, having found a place they could afford on their actual income. The rental agreement we'd signed was working, slowly rebuilding trust through consistent action rather than empty promises. I made tea and sat in Thomas's favorite chair, the one I'd kept all these years because it still smelled faintly of his cologne. "Thomas," I said to the empty room, "I finally did it. I finally sang the way you always told me I should. Not hiding, not diminishing myself, just being fully who I am." I could almost hear his response, that gentle laugh he'd always had. "About time, Margaret. About time." The next morning, the church bulletin board had a new posting. The spring concert schedule, with my name listed as Associate Director of Music. Next to it, a sign-up sheet for vocal coaching sessions for choir members interested in improving their technique. Jennifer's name was first on the list. She showed up for her coaching session on a Tuesday afternoon. Nervous and humble, "I don't expect you to make me into a great singer," she said. "I just want to be better, not for ego, but because I love music and I want to honor it properly." We worked together for an hour, addressing fundamental technique issues that had been holding her back. Breath support, vowel formation, release of tension in the jaw and throat. Basic things that would improve her singing significantly if she practiced consistently. At the end of the session, she asked, "Why are you helping me? After everything I did to you?" "Because that's what teachers do," I said. "We help people become better versions of themselves, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it." Over the following months, Jennifer's singing improved. Not dramatically, not enough to make her a soloist, but enough to make her a stronger contributor to the choir's overall sound. More importantly, her attitude transformed. She started complimenting other singers, offering encouragement rather than criticism, finding satisfaction in being part of something larger than herself. David and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. Sunday dinners together, conversations that went deeper than surface pleasantries, honest discussions about money and expectations and what it means to be family. He asked me once why I'd never told him about Juilliard, about the career I'd left behind, because it wasn't the most important thing about me, I said. Being your mother was. Teaching was. Building a life with your father was. The singing was just part of who I was, not the definition of my worth. But Mom, you were so talented. Didn't you want us to know? I wanted you to know I loved you enough to choose you over everything else, I said. That seemed more important than impressing you with credentials. The following Christmas, I sang at the church concert again. Not a solo this time, just my regular place in the soprano section. Jennifer stood next to me, singing her part with genuine joy rather than competitive desperation. During O Holy Night, when we reached the descant section I'd sung for 45 years, Patricia gestured for me to take it. I shook my head and pointed to Jennifer. She'd been practicing working with me to develop the technique needed for those high, sustained notes. Jennifer looked terrified. "I can't," she whispered. "Yes, you can," I whispered back. "I've taught you everything you need. Now trust yourself and sing." She did. Not perfectly, not with the ease that comes from decades of training, but honestly and bravely. Her voice soared above the choir, carrying the descant with determination and heart. When the carol ended, she was crying. I squeezed her hand. After the concert, someone from the congregation asked Jennifer if she'd studied voice professionally. "No," she said, smiling at me, "but I have an amazing teacher." That moment, more than any solo or recognition, felt like victory. Not the kind that comes from defeating an enemy, but the kind that comes from transforming one. I'm 70 now. My voice has changed even more over the past 2 years. The highest notes are harder to reach, requiring more careful technique and more courage to attempt. But the richness in the middle register has deepened, and I've learned to use the colors and textures that come with age rather than fighting against them. I still teach occasional voice lessons, though I'm selective about students. I only work with people who are genuinely committed to growth, rather than seeking quick fixes or validation. Jennifer brings me tea every Wednesday before choir rehearsal now. We sit together in the sanctuary before others arrive and talk about music, family, life. She's become something I never expected, a friend. She told me recently that she started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic music classes to children who can't afford private lessons. "It's the most satisfying thing I've ever done," she said. Finally using music to give rather than take. David and his wife are talking about starting a family. If they do, I'll be a grandmother who teaches their children to sing, not to perform or compete, but to find joy in the pure act of creating beauty with their voices. The house is quieter now that David and Jennifer have their own place. Sometimes I miss the noise, the presence of other people, but mostly I appreciate the peace. The ability to sing whenever I want, practice whatever I choose, live according to my own rhythms rather than accommodating others. The Oregon Music Education Foundation Scholarship Fund is growing steadily. The house will eventually sell for enough to fund dozens of students, helping young musicians pursue their dreams without the crushing debt that prevents so many from following their calling. That feels like the right legacy. Not a house passed down through inheritance, but opportunities created for strangers who share my passion for music. Last week, I received a letter from Maestro Rothstein. He's retiring from the New York Chamber Singers and writing a memoir about his 50-year career in music. He asked permission to include a chapter about me, about the talented soprano who chose teaching over performing, and how that choice created ripples of impact he'd only recently come to understand. Of course, I said yes. This Sunday, First Presbyterian Church will celebrate the choir's 50th anniversary. Patricia asked me to speak briefly about the choir's history and what it's meant to me over the decades. I've been working on my remarks, trying to capture what matters most. Not the accolades or recognition, not even the music itself, but the community we've built together. People of all abilities and backgrounds coming together weekly to create something beautiful. Young and old, trained and untrained, confident and terrified, all finding their place in the harmony. That's what church choirs are supposed to be, I'll tell them. Not showcases for individual talent, but communities where everyone contributes what they can and values what others bring. Where age is respected, youth is encouraged, and excellence is pursued without crushing those who are still learning. Jennifer will be in the audience when I speak, probably nervous that I'll reference our difficult history. I won't. That story belongs to us privately. A reminder of how far we've both come. But I will say this. The greatest gift music has given me isn't the ability to sing difficult arias or the credential of a Juilliard degree. It's the opportunity to connect with others through sound and emotion, to create moments of beauty in a world that desperately needs them, and to use whatever gifts I have in service of something larger than myself. That night, After the anniversary celebration, I'll come home to my quiet house. I'll make tea and sit in Thomas's chair and think about the life we built together. Not famous, not glamorous, but rich with meaning and connection and love, and maybe if the mood strikes, I'll sing. Not for an audience, not for recognition, just for the pure joy of it. My voice rising in the darkness, carrying melodies that have sustained me for 7 decades. Finding notes that still surprise me with their beauty, because that's the real secret Jennifer learned, and I'd always known. Talent isn't about being the best or receiving the most applause. It's about showing up consistently, contributing honestly, and using your gifts to create beauty and connection in whatever corner of the world you occupy. "Grandma, don't sing at church," she'd said, trying to silence me, but I did sing, and in singing, they taught her that silence is never the answer to cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply to let your true voice be heard. The choir list went up that December morning 2 years ago now and changed everything. Not because I won a solo or received recognition, but because I finally stopped hiding who I was to make others comfortable. Jennifer's smile didn't last because it was built on false assumptions and unearned superiority, but mine did. Because it was built on truth, on decades of quiet competence, on the knowledge that real excellence doesn't need to diminish others to shine, and that, more than any performance or accolade, is the legacy I hope to leave behind.